What's going on, guys? So today we're looking at three different blue knives that I've selected here for a couple different purposes. One, they kind of match, which I thought was nice. Two, these are knives you're probably going to see reviews on. The soonest one would be the middle one, the Cold Steel Con. But number three, and most important, it represents three different types of blade steels. And that's the point of today's video. It's going to be a quick discussion, more of a question to you guys as to what you prefer when it comes to steel. And your options are, for this, the point of the video, expensive steel versus cheap steel. Or you can look at it as hard steel versus soft steel, because generally speaking, cheap steels are softer. Harder steels are mostly higher end steels, right? And by having a harder steel, that edge generally stays sharper longer. Now, of course, there's pros and cons to everything. You know, when I do a video and I talk about a knife that's 20 bucks and it's got some cheap Chinese, you know, HCR 13 MOV or something similar, and people crap all over it and say, oh, it's horrible, doesn't hold an edge. There's plenty of people out there that actually prefer it. And we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to ask you if you're one of those people. Because occasionally I'll have conversations with people about knives, and they'll talk about stuff like that. Like, you know what? I had this $150 knife, and it was cool and everything, but it was hard to sharpen. So I prefer my $20 Walmart knife, or my $4 Walmart knife in some cases. So we're going to get into that discussion. But first, for the people who don't know, this first knife here is a Bestech Shrapnel. This one's sporting some S35VN, which I think most people would agree is a harder steel or expensive steel or a higher end steel, all the above. The next, as mentioned, the Cold Steel Con, cool knife. We'll talk about that in the near future. And that one has an AUS 8A, I believe. And this one's the newest one. I just got this yesterday. This is a new model from Stat Gear, and I think this one's called the Slinger, and this one's sporting some D2. So, before I get into the meat and potatoes of this video, I just want to mention, just because I'm thinking about it, when I said D2, it's just like so many new knives just come out today in 2018 and they're made of D2. I remember when pretty much all affordable knives were AUS 8. Just one of those things. And then, of course, when I first got into the knife hobby, everything was 440C. And over the years, over the decades, because I've been doing this for 25 years now, 25 plus years, and I see a lot of stuff that changes, you know. I'm sure there's tons of factors as to why. Mostly the steel industry that's supplying these metals for, you know, the knife industry to use. Things change, supply and demand, prices, you know, availability is a big deal. You see a lot of knives outside the US that use like an N690. I've talked to that before. It's not the best choice. Maybe they don't want to use that, but that's what's available. You know what I mean? And that's a good steel for their purpose. But anyway, back to the original point of the video is hard versus soft, expensive versus cheap. What do you prefer? Now, if we use some basic logic here and you say, okay, these are knives, their only purpose, besides making you feel cool for a lot of us, because we love knives and we have a weird passion for them, is to cut stuff, right? That's their purpose. It's a tool. It has one function, cut stuff. So, you thinking that way, you would assume that the harder the steel is and the longer it stays sharp, the better, right? That's why higher end steels are considered higher end or better. If it stays sharper longer, it's better than the cheaper steel that gets dull quickly. And most people would agree with that. And that's how I normally think. But occasionally, someone throws a wrench in my gears and that they'll, you know, remind me that they use a cheap knife and they prefer that it has a softer steel. Because there's a lot of factors goes into, obviously, when you're cutting things. And so many people are using the knives in so many different ways. You know, you could be the guy that's just in an office, occasionally open an envelope, or you could be a guy on a farm using his knife, you know, 15 times a day, every day, hard, throwing it in the mud, scratching it on, you know, staples and nails and who knows what. There's all varieties of knife owners and users. But what it comes down to is I've found over the years, now these are just generalizations, okay? These are not black and white. You know, I know there's all kinds of people doing all kinds of things, and there's plenty of people who are using very expensive high-end knives for dirty work on the farm. Generally speaking, you're not going to go to a farmer or someone who does a lot of cutting all the time and you're going to see some $700 custom knife. It's generally not going to happen, but I'm sure there's people out there that do that, okay? Again, these are just generalizations. But what I found is that some people who use their knives for their job or their career, they tend to go with cheaper, it doesn't have to be cheap, but cheaper knives. And those people who use their knives all the time, they generally know how to sharpen their knives because it's a necessity. If you use your knife day in and day out, you just have to learn how to sharpen it because they have to stay sharp. And it's very inconvenient and costly to constantly send it to someone else to sharpen. So those hard workers that are using their knives every day, they learn how to sharpen them. It's just part of the game. And once you know how to sharpen your own knife properly, you can put a really good edge on most knives. I mean, that changes the game for a lot of people. I think generally why people like some of the higher end steels is because they don't know how to sharpen. They don't really care to learn, or they're intimidated by it, which is the case a lot of times. People are just like, it's too complicated. I don't know. I don't want to mess it up. And it's not that difficult. You're literally just shaving metal off to create a finer edge. It's the basic point of sharpening. But yeah, there's a million sharpening systems and tools, and no one wants to screw up their expensive knives. So I get it. Some people are intimidated by the idea of sharpening their expensive knife. They don't want to ruin it. And some people just have no interest in sharpening. They just want a sharp knife. So I think what happens is people gravitate towards the higher end knives because it's convenient. Yeah, if I can take my knife out and it's razor sharp every time I want to use it, and it's like that for months on end or years on end, depending on how much I use it, I'd prefer that than to use my knife 10 times and have it dull. But what's thought-provoking here are the people who prefer the cheaper, softer steels because they can sharpen them. They don't mind them getting dull because they'll just whip a new edge on there. It's not a big deal. They sharpen them up. They like them softer because they can use them a little bit harder. Maybe the edges have a tendency to roll when you're doing something, really rough, as opposed to chip. When an edge chips out, and it gets damaged, you have to reprofile and stuff. That's a whole different ball of wax than fixing a rolled soft edge. So generally speaking, I'm not saying people who use their knives hard like cheap knives. That's not the point. But I know plenty of people who do use their knives really hard, and they have no problem with a $10 knife. They sharpen it, it's razor sharp, they use it a couple times, it gets dull, they sharpen it again. It's not a big deal. They're not fixated on the latest and the greatest steel, the $500 knives. They don't really care. They use them, and they use them hard. I know just so many people I talk to thousands of people about knives, and there's a lot of them that are going down to Walmart or going to a local outdoor shop or something, buying a $20 or $30 knife, and they're totally happy with it, and they're using it, and they're keeping it sharp. That's kind of the point that I want to get across is cheap knives have just as much of a purpose as expensive knives. It's like anything, like cars or whatever. Your, piece of crap, $1,000 car might get you to work the same as someone driving their Bugatti to work. It doesn't make a difference. The basic point of it is getting from point A to point B, just like a knife. Your purpose is to cut something. As long as you can maintain that edge, you don't have to have the latest and the greatest steel. But my question to you guys really, because, it comes down to preference too. Some people know how to sharpen their knives and they don't mind using cheap ones. They just prefer better tools. And I get that. And that's a lot of you out there as well. That's me. You guys know I could be totally smitten with my $4 Ozark Trail, which you guys know I brought to the wedding and worked out great. But because I've had the, I've had the luxury, I guess, of using higher end cutlery. Yeah, of course I prefer the best tool. If you're using a wrench, I don't know, just something about using a better wrench. It just performs the job better. You know what I mean? There's satisfaction in using higher end tools or higher end anything, right? You can watch a movie on a cheap TV, that's fine. But if you watch it on the latest, greatest, massive big screen, it just adds to the experience, right? So you'll get it done, but will you have a lot of fun doing it? That's really the question. But what I want to ask you guys is, do you prefer, for your users, not collecting and all that kind of stuff aside, the knife that's in your pocket, your EDC, what you're actually using for fun, leisure, or for work, do you prefer a cheaper, softer steel that you can just keep sharpening yourself, or do you prefer to have that higher end steel that you don't have to worry about, and that's why you paid extra? Obviously when you pay a lot more money for a knife, you get better fit and finish, and there's other aspects of why you're paying that price. Higher end materials is what we're kind of focusing on in this discussion, is that blade steel, But I don't know. Just kind of rambling, I guess, a little bit, just thinking about it today. I was having a conversation yesterday with someone, and that's pretty much how it went. Is, hey, I've had expensive knives, but, I was using it really rough, and a lot of people use their knives for stuff they're not supposed to be using it for. And if I took this shrapnel with this very fine point, and I was jabbing it and things and prying with it, it would snap. It's a very hard steel with a very fine point, and it would not last if you're doing something other than cutting, really. But that's why people like their cheaper knives. And there's a whole other aspect here of like the mental part of it. I know so many of you guys, if you spend $300 on a knife, you do not want to break it, whereas some people just don't care. It's just a knife. But not everyone has that kind of money to just break a $300 knife and go, no big deal, I'll buy a new one. Generally, those people are buying $10 knives. Okay, no big deal, I'll buy a new one. But anyway, I don't know, just kind of talking about knife steel choices and deal behind why you choose certain knives. You know, some people choose cheap knives because that's what they can afford. And maybe it's as simple as that for a lot of people. Hey, yeah, I'd love to get an $800 knife, but no, I got 20 bucks in my wallet, so that means I got a $20 knife. No big deal. I'll be able to sharpen it. I can use it. So, I don't know. Just talking. I guess talking out loud or thinking out loud. You guys let me know what you think down below. For this video, I'd like you to tell me your preferred knife steel and maybe why. You know, some people out there will prefer a cheaper steel just because they can maintain it. It's on a knife that they can easily replace. Maybe they use a knife for stuff you're not really supposed to be using it for, so that softer steel is beneficial. You know, the cheap stuff is sometimes better. I guess that's maybe the point of the video is what I'm trying to get across here. Sometimes that cheap knife is the better option. Kind of just depends on what you're using it for. So let me know what you think down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon. Take care.